everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're taking a trip down south and east to West Palm Beach to visit my brother. That's where he lives. And so naturally, with the CSX and Tri-Rail just feet away, I'd get out and see some trains and also document the Auburndale subdivision on the way back to Tampa. But before we already start driving north, there's some spots around town that I'd want to hit up, as this time around I'd have my car. I railfanned the West Palm Beach area this time last year, but taking Amtrak from Tampa, everything would have to be in walking distance. So now I'm about 2 miles from downtown, setting up at Florida East Coast West Palm facilities. The railroad first came to West Palm in the late 1800s when Henry Flagler extended his railroad south from Fort Pierce in 1894. Mr. Flagler, much like Henry Plant, built hotels where he built his railroad, constructing the Royal Poinciana and the Breakers Hotel around the railroad, which soon would spur development and create what we know as West Palm Beach and Palm Beach Gardens. Presently, West Palm hosts a small yard and port served commonly by FEC, utilizing road trains for the port and area local 945 during the daytime and 950 at night for the yard. To the west of the yard is Brightline's West Palm Shops, which before the Orlando extension was opened was the commuter railroad's northernmost terminal. The shops are now used to store equipment and trains overnight, as well as fix and maintain the many train sets the railroad owns. Speaking of them, northbound BLF 702 would soon appear, running right on time, speeding out of their 2-minute halt at the station just south of our post. Brightline runs hourly down here, so whenever the clock reaches the top of the hour, you can set up for a southbound and a northbound train when you're around the station. Arriving now just before 0900 would be BLF 722, sporting Brightline's sharp green livery and heading south and slowing for their stop in downtown. And here's that northbound, shortly after 9 a.m. now, and running a couple minutes late. This is BLF 720, who will get the chance to make up for some lost time as the West Main clears for his trip to Orlando. Crossing over just north of our cameras would be southbound freight number 101, now on the East Main and receiving signals once 720 was by. On the way south, they'll work Port Everglades before continuing to Miami and Hialeah Yard, where the manifest and intermodal alike will be dropped. Two blue and gray Grupo locomotives would lead this one, with the infamous liquid natural gas tender between the two. The combined 8,800 horsepower of these two ES44s would be more than enough power to bring this train south today, normally one of the biggest trains on the railroad. I break off for breakfast and some downtime after 101, but returning to the track shortly thereafter for Brightline's pair of 11 a.m. trains. First up would be northbound 721, rounding the near 90-degree curve that swings the line into Palm Beach and towards the coast. Advertising for a railroad probably has its pros and cons, but a certain benefit is that trains can be moving billboards, as this one is, wrapped for Orlando Health's headquarters near the airport and its station. We're parked about 2 miles south of downtown West Palm Beach, where the skyscrapers and luxury shopping plazas quickly turn into commercial warehouses and industrial alleys. I actually prefer to be in areas like this, not so many walkers staring at you and your camera, and way more area to park freely, without a parking meter or parking patrol cart in sight. I'd stay put as BLF 723 would barrel south, accelerating with plenty of passengers seated comfortably in one of many car types that Brightline offers. Well, I've been driving around West Palm, the downtown area, the nice area, if you will. And not only is there no areas to park, much less for free, there's no trains on the FEC at the moment. So we're heading over to the CSX trackage, and we're going to get a couple Tri-Rails, perhaps Amtrak 92. But, you know, just something we would not see normally in Central Florida. Crossing the once CSX Miami subdivision at 36th Street, I'd look north to see a headlight, so pulling off and setting up, I'd have about a minute to get ready for Tri-Rail P623, coming south after departing Auale Park just 10 minutes prior. About 500 feet from the crossing at 36th Street is a Y that breaks off the main line here and towards the FEC, where it connects to their west main at CP 25th Street. At this point in time, both transfer tracks, I believe, are out of service, with weeds overgrowing ties, tracks, crossings, and electrical bungalows alike. The signals at the Y were, at one point, dispatcher controlled, now bolted with a yellow D plate, marking this signal as a distance signal. Rule 224A in CSX's operations manual states that these installments are located in territory where push-pull movements operate, cab signals are not in service, and the max speed exceeds 30 miles an hour. Kind of an odd installment, one that I've only seen before in the Bone Valley, a distant signal utilizing a safe train 3-head mast. Either way, an approach would be lit here for a northbound movement, this one calling as P618, heading to Tri-Rail's northernmost station at Auale Park. Moseying back into downtown, I'd stumble upon Brightline's lunchtime southbound, departing West Palm Beach at 12:30 sharp. About 2 blocks from the station is FEC's runaround track, breaking off the East Main here and running about a half-mile north, where it reconnects to the East Main shortly after passing the station. This track was first installed as a temporary main line in 2016 when construction began on the station, soon turning into the freight main line wherein Brightline began service. Since the station here utilizes overhead coverings on the platforms and a modern architecture that involves the tracks rumbling underneath the waiting room and lounge, they've opted to keep the extra track here to run freight trains around the station, especially when a passenger train is stopped here making a pickup. Now, however, a train would be lined on the West Main right through the station, calling as FEC 945. This is that local that originates out of the yard about a mile north of us, now returning to home base after switching Pompano Beach and Delray on the way north. Later in the day, I'd drive north as I heard of a vehicle strike with another Brightline in an area called Lake Parker. Police had arrived and closed off the streets when I got there, so back to West Palm I'd start as the rain moved in. FEC 206 would surprise me, silently rolling north with a nice power set, filmed from the car where my camera could stay nice and dry. Departing Hialeah between 12 and 1 p.m., train 206 is freight for Jacksonville, working New Smyrna on the way there. It's a popular train for many rail fans in the area for its favorable timing and lighting, except for today, in the midst of a cold front's rainy entrance moving east. Following the South Florida Rail Corridor back into Palm Beach Gardens, I'd stopped in at West Palm Station, served by Greyhound buses, Tri-Rail, and 4 daily Amtraks. Built in 1925 by the Seaboard Airline, the station's Spanish mission architecture is reminiscent of constructions at Sebring and Avon Park, renovated by the resurgence of passenger rail down here in the late 20th century and maintained well ever since. Over the years, Tri-Rail has rebuilt much of the old station platform and canopy, although a small section of SAL construction still remains at the south end of the station, but we'll get to that later. Last train of the afternoon would come in the form of P626, curving northbound and right on time, seen ducking under I-95's massive bridge over the double track and Belvedere Road. After grabbing lunch and waiting out the rain for a while, we'd return to the tracks, parking the car behind a little studio in downtown and walking to the tracks, about 2 blocks. We'd get there just in time for Brightline's 7 p.m. pair, both with very cool crews, the northbound giving me a bit of a light show, and the southbound showing off its horn. Just minutes after our southbound was clear, another green signal would light up the East Main, now for an FEC freight, calling in the distance as train 105. As the rain would return, we'd stick it out for 105 before running back to the car, where the gear could be dried and stay that way. Symboled as an intermodal move from Jax to Miami, 105 this Friday would be mostly mixed freight, presumably extra that didn't make it onto 101 this morning. FEC isn't a big weekend railroad, so Friday nights, trains tend to be pretty big, as customers want cars out of their possession, which saves them 2 days worth of cash. About an hour later, another green signal would illuminate the LED signals at the north side of the Brightline station here for FEC train 208. Leaving Miami around 6:45 tonight, he'd get into West Palm Beach about 2 hours later with 2 more Group O leaders, now battling through the rain that has once again begun to fall. .208 is manifest in intermodal traffic out of Hialeah for Bowden Yard in Jacksonville. On his way north, he sometimes switches Fort Pierce, but only when needed, not including tonight. And so after dodging bright lines up to Cocoa Beach, 208 would have a straight shot to Jacksonville, arriving the following morning around 5 a.m. After 208, the rain would continue, but hearing X651 on the radio on the Tri-Rail side, I'd hop over there. Symboled as an extra version of P651, this Tri-Rail would be completely empty, hence its ID, a southbound deadhead move to Tri-Rail's facilities closer to Miami. And just as quickly as we had jumped west to Tri-Rail, we'd parked the car once again along the FEC as another northbound manifest was on its way. With news that the train had cleared Fort Lauderdale and into New River Drawbridge a while ago, I knew we'd have about an hour and 10-minute window until he got here. It had now been a little more than an hour by the time we set up, so in moments, our northbound would appear, calling us train 292 and absolutely ripping through town. With the champ leader and a friendly crew, 292 would have green signals out of Miami, departing tonight around 8 p.m., with rock out of FEC's Medley Rock Yard for Jacksonville. Medley is one of FEC's biggest customers, with cars for and coming from the facility on most manifest, and even having designated rock unit trains like this 292, southbound 193, and the 336 and 335 pair. My brother and I would be about done with all this cold and rain tonight, but we'd stick it out for one more train, now set up comfortably under Seaboard's canopy over their West Palm station. Here at the south end, some of SAL's original canopy construction remains next to a signal the railroad calls Mockingbird, which would be lit up tonight for southbound train M453, coming through the top of the corridor as we speak at Dyer, about 6 miles from our location. Led tonight by 2 GE wide cabs, the second pair of which is in fairly shiny CSX.com paint, one of many CM44 rebuilds. After their drop at Palm Center of auto racks from Baldwin, 453 is now only about 5,000 feet tonight, all destined for Miami after working Okeechobee on the way south. .453 would end our night here just after 10 p.m., but I'd be back out along the CSX for my drive back home just 3 days later. Good morning, everybody. It is 9:30ish on January 20th, MLK Day. I'm heading north right now on the Beeline Highway out of West Palm Beach. I'm heading up to Indiantown because we got an M453 coming south this morning. He's already working Okeechobee as we speak, so we should be able to beat him there and see what else we get along the way back home. Taking Road 710 out of town, I'd be paralleling the Auburndale subdivision all the way to Okeechobee with a couple stops along the way. Built in record time by the Seaboard Airline Railroad, the trackage would start out of Coleman and was laid in the early 1920s, stretching south by east towards Auburndale, where still today it crosses the old Atlantic coastline Tampa, Maine, reaching into Miami and the market around Hialeah just a year later. This was called the Miami Extension, and it's still a piece of trackage utilized daily by 4 Amtraks, 4 freights, and a few locals. Coming into Jupiter on State Road 710, you'll cross a spur track that leads into an industrial park. This is Palm Center, where all those auto racks on M453 and the 452 are destined for, picked up in Baldwin and dropped for unloading here. Pushing north, I'd come into Indiantown as light showers continued east. At the north end of the community, CSX maintains a signaled spur track that breaks out of the main line at milepost SX 923.5. It's known as Baker's Spur on the timetable and used to host Florida Power & Light's Indiantown Power Plant, built for the area in 1995. For 22 years, the plant received coal trains until it shut its doors in 2017, completely demolished and flattened by 2021. FPL has replaced the plant with a $10 million solar energy facility right next door, which advertised cheaper rates for customers and much better for the ecosystem. In the 3 years it's been operational, both promises have held true, although it's still a shame that coal will likely never travel down these rails again. When coal trains did run up here, they'd come into the spur at 10 miles an hour, drop their whole train within the loop track at the plant, and then go engines light to Dyer, where CSX houses a crew base office and tracks to park locomotives. FPL owned 2 locomotives at this plant for switching and unloading operations, both of which are now nowhere to be found. Five miles south of the old power plant is the swing bridge over the St. Lucie Canal. Once manned on-site between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., the bridge is now remotely controlled by the tender down in Miami, observed by a system of cameras and sensors like the rest of these in the state. Similar to the design that the Palmetto sub uses at the Auale River in Gibsonton, the bridge swings into place via motors and gears underneath the span above the water. Used as the quickest and only route for ships and watercraft to reach Lake Okeechobee from the Atlantic Ocean, the canal is pretty busy, now taking a break in the action for Amtrak 98, barreling north out of Miami and running right on time without a thought of stopping now. Pressing north again on the Beeline, I'd hear Amtrak 98 and M453 meeting in Okeechobee, so I'd find the next control point to set up for this daylight freight. 453 is running about 12 hours later than he'd usually be because of track curfews around Auburndale, pushing back many night trains around here, making for a great opportunity to film them in daylight, something not very common around here. Pulling off 12 miles north of Indiantown, I'm setting up at Marcy. Marcy is one of 2 at-grade interlockings on this subdivision, in this case crossing the FEC's K branch, now part of the South Central Florida Express trackage used by US Sugar. With the CSX continuing south towards Miami, the old FEC crossed here on its way to Lake Harbor in sugarcane country, out from their Fort Pierce yard along the coast, 28 miles to our east. Several times a week, US Sugar runs a train over this diamond to Fort Pierce to pick up interchange traffic from the FEC, including today, actually right now. To my great surprise, the LED headlights of one of US Sugar's Jeep 40s would round the corner and come to a stop at the diamond. There's a derail interlocked to the signal here, which would be showing a red or stopped aspect, as 453 would have greens on his side. In about 10 minutes, M45319 would arrive from the north with 2 engines and a hefty train, with Rail Box's pink breast cancer awareness painted boxcar just 4 cars behind the lead locomotive. 453 would have a good train for Miami today, sandwiched by two GE CM44 rebuilds with the auto rack cut for Palm Center bringing up the rear. It would take about 90 seconds for US Sugar's Fort Pierce turn to take off from their stance after 453 cleared, with upgraded signals over the diamond, by extension setting the derail in the position for a train movement. Leading today's turn would be USSC 4201, a Jeep 40-2, leading number 6325, an SD40M-2, freshly painted and acquired by the railroad. These two matching engines are in US Sugar's new paint scheme, which I think is pretty cool, pairing well with their surrounding colorscapes that this railroad operates in. For Marcy, the radio would once again fall silent, so back on 710 to Okeechobee I'd go, about a 14-mile commute. Situated on the banks of Florida's largest lake and providing the name for the town, Okeechobee hosts a population of just over 5,000 residents, incorporated officially in 1915. Okeechobee is a massive agricultural town, built upon the farms and ranches in the surrounding areas, fed by the railroad and its drop-offs of grain hoppers and feed cars. With a daily local number L785 based out of the Amtrak station here, Okeechobee stays pretty busy, with M453 and 452 working the town every night with cars for various industries in town. Built over a decade ago, Amtrak station here is made up of a well-maintained platform and shelter, yet doesn't employ any on-location employees or offer any services. When efforts to restore the old SAL depot here fell through, the town collected enough funds to maintain itself as a passenger stop for the Silver Service, although that's where the luxury would end. Without a noteworthy station or anything running in the area, I'd leave town after grabbing some breakfast and route to Sebring. The last time I was in Sebring was about 3 years ago for the Sugarland Express Apricot Special, a train of private cars pulled by US Sugar's steam locomotive number 148 in April of 2022. Entering town from the south, I'd cross the US Sugar's tracks to see a medium clear signal for something coming off the short line. Joining the SX line at the old SAL Sebring station, I'd grab a quick shot of the signal and swing around to the station where local L764 would soon be passing. 764 is a nightly local that originates in Winston and usually runs down here around midnight, interchanging with the US Sugar in the very early morning hours. But like today's M453, this train would be also affected by the Tie Gang curfew in Auburndale, pushing back his time slot a good 12 hours, making for this rare shot of a freight train passing Sebring in daylight. 764's train comes down from the north on manifest M603 and sent out the next night. Mostly potash and other ingredients used in fertilizer, fitting for a railroad built on the sugarcane production, 764 is a nightly move, getting his consist picked up the very next morning by US Sugar's Sebring turn out of their Clewiston facilities. Now on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places, the depot here at Sebring is similar to West Palm's and Avon Park's, but built just a year prior to the former in 1924. Seaboard at one point ran 6 trains by here daily, seeing trains like the Floridian, Palmetto, Sunset Limited, and Silver Palm under Amtrak ownership. Now serving 4 daily Amtraks like the rest of the state, Sebring's old station stands as a restored reminder of how developers lured people into the state through tropical designs to welcome northern passengers into the sunny and warm state. Just a couple miles north of the station is Sebring's defect detector, situated beautifully in the middle of orange groves, the landscape of most of the land down here. Hosting the distant signal to Sebring as well, This little inlet is notable to me for its seaboard bungalow, painted in their vintage cream and green scheme, still standing after decades of use. Out of commission and replaced by a new steel hut in the early 2010s, Sebring is one of 3 or 4 defect detectors on this old main line to still be intact, virtually untouched by the railroad and vandals alike. A few pictures here and we'd be back on the road northbound, driving about 6 miles through lush orange groves and into the community of Avon Park. Comparable to Sebring, Avon Park was another station stop for Seaboard, warranting another one of their classic mission-style stations, fitting the architecture of the others that still remain on the path to Miami. Now housing the Avon Park Historical Society, the museum also hosts an old California Zephyr passenger car, named the Silver Palm, now retrofitted with booths and tables for lunch parties, like what's happening inside today, for members of the society. At this point, this station was also served by a handful of passenger trains a day, currently acting now as a poignant reminder of this area's golden age. Still seeing plenty of action daily, the station is no longer served, evident by Amtrak 40's cruising speed through town, today with the Phase 7 Heritage Unit P42 trailing in the second position. Now on US 98, I'd come into the rural side of Polk County near Lake Wales, hearing another Amtrak meeting the northbound 40 about 5 miles from me. So I'd scope out a couple of crossing shots before settling on the US 98 bridge out here for an overhead shot. The wind would be really cold, but with ample room designed for pedestrians on this bridge, I wouldn't have a problem waiting a few minutes for the next catch, coming in the shape of Amtrak 97, with yet another charger leading the way south. With my afternoon drive still an hour and a half to home, I'd get going after 97, as even on this MLK day, I planned on beating the traffic on I-4 that commonly builds around Tampa, my route home. To my surprise though, the route home would be fairly open, so I'd stop one last time in Lakeland at Wabash Avenue, milepost A853 on ACL's Tampa, Maine. Screaming north would be a very late Amtrak 41 on its way to Miami this cool afternoon. '41's passing would end my day trackside and weekend in West Palm Beach. Overall, a very nice break from school and my normal spots that I hit, and I hope you all thought the same. But until we meet again somewhere out there trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.